Commander Susan Hill stared at the massive holographic display that dominated the center of Earth's Defense Command. The blue glow from the projection cast shadows across her tired face. She hadn't slept properly in days, not since their long-range scanners had picked up the alien fleet. The room was quiet except for the soft beeping of computers and the occasional whisper between officers. 20 of Earth's best military and scientific minds worked at stations around the circular room, but no one had much to say anymore. The data was clear, and it was terrifying. Susan zoomed in on the red cluster of ships moving steadily toward Earth, the Vrexians. Even their name sounded like a disease. "Jack, give me the latest calculations," Susan called out, her voice steady despite her growing fear. Jack Rogers looked up from his console. With his messy brown hair and rumpled uniform, he looked more like a college professor than Earth's leading astrophysicist. He adjusted his glasses and walked over to Susan's station. "The fleet is maintaining constant speed," he said, pointing to the trajectory lines on the display. "At their current velocity, they'll reach our outer defense perimeter in exactly 3 months and 2 days. Susan nodded. "And their pattern matches the previous invasions?" "Perfectly," Jack confirmed. "They'll establish an orbital blockade, jam our communications, and then demand surrender. Based on what happened to the Centauri colonies, we'll have about 48 hours to comply before they start targeting major population centers." Susan had reviewed the intelligence reports dozens of times. Over the past decade, the Vrexians had systematically conquered 7 planetary systems. Their approach was always the same: quick, efficient, and utterly merciless. They stripped planets of valuable resources, incorporated any useful technology into their own systems, and then moved on to the next target. "What about our defenses?" Susan asked. Jack shook his head slightly. "The United Earth Fleet has been mobilized, but honestly, the technological gap is too wide. Our best simulations give us a 10% chance of repelling the initial assault, and that's being optimistic." Susan rubbed her eyes. She had been promoted to commander of the International Space Defense Initiative just 6 months ago. The position was supposed to be mostly diplomatic, coordinating defense strategies between Earth's nations. No one had expected an actual alien invasion during her watch. "There has to be something we haven't considered," she said, more to herself than to Jack. "Well, there is one thing," Jack said hesitantly. "It's a long shot, but Dr. Alan Carter has been working on something that might help." Susan looked up sharply. "What is it?" "A quantum transmission system," Jack explained. "It's experimental, but the theory is sound. It could potentially send a message instantaneously across vast distances, bypassing normal space-time limitations." "You mean we could call for help?" Susan asked, a small spark of hope igniting within her. "Maybe," Jack said carefully. "If there's anyone out there to hear us. And if they're willing to help." Susan straightened her uniform and made a decision. "Take me to Dr. Carter." An hour later, Susan and Jack stood in a vast underground laboratory beneath the Rocky Mountains. The facility had been built in secret, funded by a coalition of governments, desperate for a technological edge against the Vrexian threat. Dr. Alan Carter was not what Susan had expected. The man responsible for Earth's most advanced communication system was young, maybe 35, with kind eyes and an easy smile that seemed out of place given the circumstances. "Commander Hill," Alan greeted her, extending his hand. "I've been following your career. Your strategy during the Mars colony crisis was brilliant." Susan shook his hand firmly. "That was just a resource dispute between human colonies, Dr. Carter. What we're facing now is extinction." Alan's smile faded. "I understand. Jack has kept me informed about the Vrexian approach. He tells me you've built something that might help us," Susan said, looking around the laboratory at equipment she couldn't begin to comprehend. Alan led them through rows of humming machines toward a central platform where a strange device stood. It looked like a silver sphere surrounded by rotating rings of some dark material. "This is the quantum transmitter," Alan said, pride evident in his voice. "It creates a bridge between entangled particles, allowing information to travel instantaneously regardless of distance." "Has it been tested?" Susan asked. On a solar system scale, yes, Alan admitted. We've successfully communicated with our outposts on Europa and Titan with zero delay. But we've never attempted interstellar transmission. Could it reach beyond Vrexian territory? Jack asked. Alan nodded slowly. In theory, yes. There's no distance limitation with quantum entanglement. The challenge is having a receiver properly calibrated to interpret the message. Susan walked around the device, considering the implications. So we could send a call for help, but we have no idea if anyone would receive it. Exactly, Alan said. And even if they did, we don't know if there's anyone out there both willing and able to stand against the Vrexians. Susan touched the cool metal of the transmitter. Earth had always been alone in its corner of the galaxy. There had been signs of distant civilizations, radio signals, and anomalous energy readings, but no direct contact, until the Vrexians came. The United Earth Council is meeting tomorrow to discuss our options, Susan said. Every nation is mobilizing its military, but we all know it won't be enough. I want this transmitter ready to present as an alternative strategy. Alan looked concerned. What exactly would we say? How do you introduce yourself to an unknown civilization and ask them to risk their existence for yours? The question hung in the air between them. Susan had no easy answer. We show them who we are, she said finally. Not just our desperation, but what makes humanity worth saving. The emergency council meeting the next day was chaotic. Representatives from every nation argued about defense strategies, evacuation priorities, and whether to attempt communication with the Vrexians. Susan stood before the council and presented Dr. Carter's quantum transmitter as a possible solution. The response was mixed. You want to announce our presence to even more alien species? The Russian representative demanded. How do we know they won't be worse than the Vrexians? We don't, Susan admitted. But we know what happens if we do nothing. The Vrexians will reach Earth in 3 months, and we cannot defeat them with our current technology. The Chinese representative leaned forward. What would this message contain? That's what we need to decide, Susan replied. It needs to explain our situation but also show who we are as a species, why we deserve to survive. After hours of debate, the council voted. By a narrow margin, they approved the quantum transmission project. Susan was given authority to assemble a team of Earth's best minds to craft humanity's most important message. As she left the council chamber, Susan felt the weight of her responsibility. She had 3 months to find the perfect words, to save humanity, and someone out there willing to listen. Dr. Alan Carter hadn't left his laboratory in the Rocky Mountains for 3 days. Empty coffee cups littered his workstation, and his eyes burned from staring at screens. But time was the one resource they couldn't spare. The Vrexian fleet moved, closer to Earth with each passing second. The laboratory had transformed since Commander Susan Hill's visit. What was once a quiet research facility now buzzed with activity as 30 specialists worked around the clock. Linguists, anthropologists, psychologists, and engineers had been gathered from around the world for one purpose: to craft a message that might save humanity. Alan rubbed his tired eyes and looked across the room where his research partner, Maya Peters, was deep in conversation with Dr. Linda Weiss, Earth's leading xenopsychologist. The problem is that we know almost nothing about whoever might receive this, Linda was saying. How do we craft a message for a completely unknown audience? Maya tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear. We start with universal constants. Mathematics, physics, basic chemical structures. Those should be the same everywhere. Alan walked over to join them. The technical part of the transmission is ready. We can send the message. We just need to decide what that message should be. Linda gestured to her tablet, which displayed analysis of intercepted Vrexian communications. From what we've gathered, the Vrexians see other species purely as resources. They don't conquer out of hatred or ideology. They're simply efficient. Like locusts moving from field to field, Maya said quietly. Alan nodded. So we need to show whoever receives our message that we're more than just resources. That humanity has value beyond our planet's minerals and metals. The team had been debating this question for days. Some argued they should emphasize Earth's military potential as allies. Others thought they should appeal to moral principles, assuming advanced civilizations would have developed ethical systems. Still others wanted to offer trade or technological exchange. What makes humans different? Alan asked suddenly. If you had to explain to someone who had never met a human what makes our species special, what would you say? The room fell silent as everyone considered the question. It was Susan Hill who finally answered. She had just entered the laboratory, looking as tired as the rest of them. Our resilience, she said, and our compassion, even when it doesn't make logical sense. All eyes turned to her as she walked toward the central console. We protect the weak at cost to ourselves. We sacrifice for strangers. We save other species from extinction because we believe they have inherent value. Susan looked around the room. I've reviewed the Vrexian conquest patterns. They don't understand this kind of thinking. Maybe whoever we reach will. The idea resonated with the team. Over the next 48 hours, they assembled a transmission package unlike anything humanity had created before. It began with mathematical sequences to establish intelligence and basic scientific understanding. Next came samples of human languages, starting with simple concepts and building to more complex ideas. They included core scientific discoveries to demonstrate their technological level, but the heart of the message was what followed. They included records of human compassion, people running into burning buildings to save strangers, communities rebuilding after disasters, nations sending aid to former enemies, humans risking their lives to save animals during floods, and families adopting orphaned children from across the world. They showed humanity's art, music, and literature, creations that served no survival purpose but revealed the human spirit. They included the poetry of love and loss, symphonies that could bring tears to the eyes, and paintings that captured the beauty of existence. We're showing them our vulnerability, Jack Rogers pointed out during the final review. He had joined the team after completing his analysis of the Vrexian fleet's approach pattern. Is that wise? It's honest, Alan replied. And if whoever receives this doesn't value these qualities, they probably wouldn't help us anyway. On the 7th day, the quantum transmitter was ready. The message had been encoded into the system, and the engineers had pushed the experimental technology to its limits, hoping to reach as far into the cosmos as possible. The team gathered around the silver sphere as it hummed with increasing energy. The rotating rings began to spin faster, creating a blur of motion around the central core. The lab's lights dimmed as power was diverted to the transmitter. Alan's fingers hovered over the activation sequence. Once we send this, there's no taking it back, and we'll be announcing our presence to whoever is out there, friend or foe. Susan stepped forward. We've already been found by the Vrexians. We have nothing to lose. Alan nodded and entered the final command. The quantum transmitter pulsed with blinding light as the message, humanity's desperate hope, was cast into the void. For several seconds no one spoke. The enormity of what they had just done weighed on them all. They had reached out from their tiny blue planet, calling into the darkness, hoping someone kind would answer. Now what? Maya asked softly. Now we prepare, as if no help is coming, Susan replied, because it probably isn't. She turned to address the entire team. The quantum transmitter will remain active to receive any potential response. Dr. Carter and his core team will monitor it. The rest of us need to focus on Earth's defenses. As the group dispersed, Alan stayed by the transmitter, watching its monitoring systems. He knew the odds were astronomically against them. The message could reach too far and find nothing. It could reach too short a distance and find only the Vrexians, or it could reach a civilization with no interest in helping. Earth Maya joined him by the console. Do you think anyone will answer? Alan looked at the data streaming across the screen, the quantum particles maintaining their tenuous connection across unimaginable distances. I don't know, he admitted. But for the first time in human history, we've reached beyond our solar system. Whatever happens next, we're not alone anymore. As days passed with no response, hope began to fade. The Vrexian fleet continued its steady approach, now just 2.5 months from Earth's orbit. Nations around the world accelerated their preparations for war, knowing it was likely a fight they couldn't win. But in a quiet laboratory beneath the Rocky Mountains, the quantum transmitter continued its silent vigil, waiting for an answer from the stars. 2 weeks passed with no response to Earth's quantum message. The mood at Defense Command had grown darker with each passing day. Military exercises intensified worldwide as humanity prepared for a battle most believed was unwinnable. The Vrexian fleet was now just over 2 months away from Earth. Commander Susan Hill stood before the United Earth Council, delivering her weekly status report. The faces on the screens around her showed the same grim expression. Hope was fading fast. Our orbital defense platforms will be fully operational within 10 days, Susan reported. The United Fleet has completed its formation drills and civilian evacuation protocols are ready for implementation. And the quantum transmitter? Asked the representative from India. Any response? Susan shook her head. Nothing yet. Dr. Carter maintains constant monitoring, but there has been no indication that our message was received by anyone. The Chinese representative leaned forward. Perhaps it is time to consider alternative approaches. The Vrexians have accepted surrender from other worlds. Some populations were allowed to survive as labor forces. Murmurs spread through the virtual assembly. Susan felt a chill run down her spine. With all due respect, she said firmly, surrendering to the Vrexians would mean the end of human freedom. Based on intelligence from their previous conquests, they would strip Earth of its resources and reduce survivors to essentially slaves. That is not an option I am willing to recommend. Before anyone could respond, Susan's communication device buzzed with an urgent alert. The message was simple but made her heart race. Transmitter activity, come now. I need to end this meeting, Susan announced. There's been a development with the quantum transmitter. I'll update the council as soon as I have information. Susan rushed from the council chambers to the waiting transport. The flight to the Rocky Mountain facility took 30 agonizing minutes. She spent every second reviewing possible scenarios in her mind. Had someone responded? Was it a trick from the Vrexians or just a technical glitch giving false hope? When she arrived at the laboratory, the atmosphere was electric. Scientists and military personnel crowded around the central platform where Alan Carter was working furiously at the main console. What do we have? Susan demanded as she pushed. Through the crowd, Alan looked up, his face a mixture of excitement and disbelief. We're receiving a transmission through the quantum network. It's not random noise or interference. It's a structured signal. Susan moved closer to look at the screens. From who? The Vrexians? No, Alan said. The signal is coming from beyond Vrexian territory, way beyond, and it's using the same quantum frequency we established, responding directly to our transmission. Maya Peters approached with a tablet displaying rows of complex mathematical sequences. It started with prime numbers and basic physics constants, just like we did in our message. Then it shifted to this. She pointed to a pattern of symbols that repeated with slight variations. Can you decode it? Susan asked. We're working on it, Linda Weiss said, joining the conversation. The patterns suggest a language system, but it's unlike anything we've ever encountered. It might take days to... She was interrupted by a chime from one of the monitoring stations. Jack Rogers called out from across the room. We're getting more. The transmission rate just increased by a factor of 10. For the next 6 hours, the quantum transmitter received a continuous stream of data. The team worked nonstop, using every available computer to analyze the incoming message. Gradually, patterns emerged. The unknown civilization was building a translation matrix, teaching them how to understand their language. By midnight, they had their first partial translation. We are the Guardians, Alan read from the screen, his voice filled with wonder. Your message has been received and verified. We have monitored the expansion of the species you identify as Vrexians. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications they were not alone, someone had heard them. There's more coming in, Maya said excitedly. It's clarifying now. The translation continued to appear on the main screen. The Guardians maintain balance in this sector of the galaxy. We have contained Vrexian expansion to a limited zone as part of a non-interference policy with developing civilizations. Your use of quantum communication technology was unexpected and indicates advancement beyond our projections for your species. Susan leaned closer. They knew about us? And the Vrexians? It sounds like they've been watching both, Jack said. But why didn't they help the other worlds the Vrexians conquered? The answer came in the next section of the translation. Our policy is non-interference with developing civilizations, allowing natural evolutionary and technological progression. Species must overcome or succumb to challenges independently. This approach prevents dependency and ensures only self-sufficient civilizations join the galactic community. Linda Weiss nodded slowly. It makes a certain kind of sense, like parents not solving every problem for their children. But they're responding to us now, Susan pointed out. Something changed their minds. The final part of the translation appeared. Your message contained two elements that warrant reconsideration of your status. 1. Quantum communication technology beyond your expected development stage. 2. Cultural emphasis on cooperation and compassion, despite competitive evolutionary origins. This combination classifies Earth as harmony-capable, a rare designation. Prepare for contact. You are no longer alone. For several seconds, no one spoke. The implications were too enormous to process quickly. Does this mean they're going to help us against the Vrexians? Jack finally asked. I don't know, Susan admitted. But they're talking to us. That's more than we had yesterday. Alan was already typing at his console. I'm preparing a response. We need to ask directly if they'll intervene. Ask them how soon they can get here, Susan added. The Vrexian fleet is still on schedule to reach us in 2 months. Before Alan could send the message, the quantum transmitter pulsed again. New text appeared on the screen. Guardian representatives have been dispatched to your solar system. Estimated arrival, 7 standard days. Vrexian fleet movements are being monitored. Maintain current defense preparations but refrain from any direct communication with Vrexian forces until Guardian arrival. The room erupted in excited conversation. After weeks of preparing for certain defeat, the possibility of salvation was overwhelming. Susan raised her hands for quiet. This is a promising development, but we don't know the Guardian's intentions or capabilities. We continue all defense preparations as planned. She turned to Alan. Send a message confirming we understand and will await their arrival. Ask if there's anything we should prepare for their representatives. As the team worked to craft the response, Susan stepped away to a quiet corner of the lab. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to feel a small flicker of hope. Earth had reached out into the darkness, and something had answered. Whether that answer would bring salvation or new complications remained to be seen. She looked at the quantum transmitter, still pulsing with energy as it maintained its connection across unimaginable distances. In just 7 days, humanity would meet its first non-hostile alien species. The universe had suddenly become much larger, and perhaps a little less threatening. 7 days after the Guardian's message, Earth waited. The news of potential alien assistance had been carefully managed. Only top military and government officials knew the full story. To the public, the increased defense activities were explained as standard preparations against the approaching Vrexian fleet. Commander Susan Hill, Dr. Alan Carter, and a small team of specialists gathered at a remote airbase in the Nevada desert. This location had been prepared according to the Guardian specifications, a large open area away from major population centers. Anything on the scanners? Susan asked, checking her watch for the 5th time in the last hour. Jack Rogers adjusted his equipment. Nothing yet, but they said 7 days and it's only been 6 days and 23 hours. Alan paced nervously. What if they don't come? What if they change their minds? They'll come, Susan said with more confidence than she felt. The truth was, no one knew what to expect. Would the Guardians arrive in massive ships? Would they look remotely human? Would they truly help against the Vrexians? Or did they have their own agenda? At exactly 7 days from their message, the team's equipment began to malfunction. Screens flickered, communications went static, and a strange humming filled the air. "Something's happening," Maya Peters said, pointing to the sky. There was no dramatic light show, no massive ship descending from the clouds. Instead, the air about 50 meters in front of them simply shifted. The best way Susan could describe, it was like looking through heat waves rising from hot pavement. The distortion grew until it was about 3 meters in diameter. "They're here," Linda Weiss whispered. From the distortion emerged 3 figures. They were tall and slender with pearlescent skin that seemed to shift colors slightly as they moved. Their faces had recognizable features: 2 large eyes, a small nose, and a mouth, but the proportions were just different enough to seem alien. They wore simple robes that flowed around them as if lighter than air. The tallest of the 3 stepped forward and raised a hand in greeting. When it spoke, the words seemed to form directly in Susan's mind rather than coming through her ears. I'm Excel Torin, lead guardian. We come in peace and with interest in your situation." Susan stepped forward as Earth's designated representative. "I am Commander Susan Hill of the International Space Defense Initiative. On behalf of humanity, I welcome you to Earth." Cel Torin's large eyes studied her, then looked past to the others. "We have reviewed your transmission in detail. Your species is young but shows remarkable potential. You have achieved quantum communication far earlier in your development than expected. We built the transmitter because we had no other options," Alan explained, moving to stand beside Susan. "The Vrexians would have destroyed us." The second guardian stepped forward. "I am Elix Val, strategic observer. The Vrexian expansion has been troubling. They were once a promising species, but their society became focused solely on consumption and growth at any cost." Susan got straight to the point. "Will you help us stop them?" The third guardian, who had not yet spoken, made a gesture with long, elegant fingers. "I am Mirasen, cultural assessor. Help is a complex concept. We do not simply fight battles for developing species. Such actions create dependency and prevent natural growth." Susan felt her heart sink. Had they come all this way just to observe Earth's destruction? Cel Torin must have sensed her disappointment. "But your situation is unique. Your message demonstrated not just technological achievement but cultural values that align with Galactic Concord principles." "The Galactic Concord?" Jack asked. "A cooperative alliance of harmony-capable civilizations," Elix Val explained. "The Concord maintains balance while allowing diversity and independence. And you think we qualify for this?" "Concord?" Alan asked. Mirasen made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Not yet, but you have potential. Your message showed compassion, alongside capability, a rare combination." Susan tried to hide her frustration. "That's wonderful to hear, but the Vrexian fleet will reach Earth in less than 2 months. Potential doesn't help us survive." The 3 guardians exchanged looks, communicating silently. "We have already taken action regarding the Vrexians," Cel Torin finally said. "Their fleet has been contained through a space-time barrier. They cannot currently advance toward Earth." Stunned silence followed this revelation. "You've stopped them?" Susan asked in disbelief. "Just like that?" "Temporarily," Elix Val clarified. "This is not a solution but a pause to allow for negotiation." "Negotiation?" Alan repeated. "With the Vrexians? They don't negotiate, they conquer." Mirasen's expression was unreadable. "All species can change. The Vrexians were permitted a limited expansion zone as part of our containment strategy. They were never supposed to encounter a harmony-capable species within that zone." "So what happens now?" Susan asked. "A diplomatic meeting," Cel Torin announced. "Representatives from Earth, the Guardian Council, and the Vrexian Command will convene on a neutral platform to determine the path forward." Susan's military training kicked in. "What are the terms? What's our negotiating position?" "That is partly why we are here," Elix Val said, "to prepare Earth's representatives for the complexities of interspecies diplomacy. The Vrexians understand only strength and resource value. You must demonstrate that humanity has worth beyond physical assets. And if the negotiations fail, Jack asked the question everyone was thinking. The Guardians were silent for a moment before Zell-Torin responded. If diplomacy fails, the Guardians will not allow a harmony-capable species to be destroyed. But our intervention would have consequences for galactic stability. We would prefer a peaceful resolution, Mirasen added. Violence, even justified, ripples across civilizations. Susan looked back at her team, then to the Guardians. When does this diplomatic meeting happen? We have scheduled it for 3 of your Earth days from now, Zell-Torin answered. You and Dr. Carter will represent humanity, accompanied by 2 others of your choosing. Me? Alan looked surprised. I'm a scientist, not a diplomat. You created the quantum transmitter that reached us, Mirasen explained. Your perspective has value in these discussions. Susan nodded firmly. We'll be ready, but I need to understand more about both the Guardians and the Vrexians if we're going to represent Earth effectively. Of course, Zell-Torin agreed. We will provide all necessary information. As the sun set over the Nevada desert, the Guardians began sharing knowledge of a galaxy far more complex and populated than humanity had ever imagined. Susan and her team listened in awe as they learned about ancient civilizations, interstellar politics, and technological wonders beyond their comprehension. Earth's fate was no longer sealed, but the path forward remained uncertain. In 3 days, humans would sit at a table with both their would-be destroyers and their potential protectors. The outcome would determine not just Earth's survival, but its place in a vast cosmic community that had been watching from the shadows all along. 6 months had passed since the historic meeting between humans, Guardians, and Vrexians. Earth had changed in ways no one could have imagined before the alien fleet appeared on their scanners. Susan Hill stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, Earth's first orbital diplomatic outpost. Through the massive viewport, she could see her home planet glowing blue and green against the blackness of space. Small lights twinkled across its dark side, cities full of people going about, their lives, most still adjusting to the knowledge that humanity was not alone in the universe. Beautiful view, said Alan Carter as he joined her by the window. Hard to believe we almost lost it all. Susan nodded. Sometimes I wake up thinking it was all a dream, that the Vrexians are still coming, and the quantum message never reached anyone. But it did, Alan said simply. The diplomatic meeting had been tense. Susan and Alan, along with Jack Rogers and Maya Peters, had represented Earth. They had boarded a Guardian vessel that transported them to a massive space station at the edge of the solar system, a structure that had apparently been there for centuries, cloaked from human detection. The Vrexian representatives had been nothing like they expected, not the violent conquerors of their fears, but calculating cold beings who viewed the universe as resources to be claimed and used. Their bodies were covered in armor-like plates, and their multiple eyes never seemed to blink. The negotiations had lasted 3 days. The Guardians had mediated with infinite patience as humans and Vrexians tried to find common ground. The turning point came when Susan had a simple but brilliant idea. Show them our message, she had suggested to Zell-Torin. The same one we sent to you. The Guardians had displayed Earth's quantum message for the Vrexian delegation. The mathematics, the languages, and most importantly, the examples of human compassion and cooperation. The Vrexians had watched in silence, their alien faces unreadable. Then something unexpected happened. One of the Vrexian representatives, a decorated commander named Krasvor, had asked a question. Why do you expend resources protecting those who cannot benefit you? It had taken hours of careful explanation for the humans to convey concepts like empathy and altruism in terms the Vrexians could understand. They had to frame compassion as an evolutionary advantage, how cooperation had allowed humans to build civilizations despite their physical weaknesses. By the end of the meeting, the Vrexians had agreed to withdraw from Earth's solar system. In return, humans would share their unique perspective with both the Guardians and, surprisingly, a faction of Vrexians who wished to explore alternatives to their society's resource-focused expansion. Ambassador Hill, a voice called from behind them, interrupting Susan's thoughts. The Concord representatives have arrived for the cultural exchange briefing. Susan turned from the viewport. It still felt strange to be addressed as ambassador rather than commander. After the diplomatic breakthrough, she had been appointed Earth's first ambassador to the Galactic Concord. Thank you, Ben. We'll be right there. As they walked through the station's curved corridors, Susan and Alan passed representatives from 3 different alien species, a Guardian cultural attaché, 2 reformed Vrexians who had broken away from their empire's militaristic leadership, and a Fulani trader whose species had joined the Concord centuries ago. 5 different species on one station, Alan marveled. And this is just the beginning. The Guardians had explained that the Galactic Concord included over 30 intelligent species, all with their own unique biologies, cultures, and perspectives. Earth had been granted provisional status, with full membership to be evaluated after 50 years of integration. They entered the conference room where delegates were gathering. Maya Peters was already there, explaining Earth's music to a fascinated Fulani. Since the contact, she had become Earth's foremost xenolinguist, developing translation systems for interspecies communication. Jack Rogers stood nearby, deep in conversation with a Vrexian scientist. The two were comparing notes on quantum physics. It turned out that while Vrexian technology was more advanced in many areas, human theoretical models for quantum communication were uniquely innovative. The cultural exchange was benefiting both species. Ambassador Hill, Zeltorin greeted her with the formal hand gesture that had become standard protocol. The Council has reviewed your proposal for expanding the Earth education program. It has been approved. Susan smiled. That's excellent news. We can begin bringing more human teachers and students to Concord facilities next month. Alan checked the datapad he always carried. The quantum communication network is ready for the expansion. We've established nodes in 20 major Earth cities, all connected to the Concord Central Hub. The quantum transmitter that had saved humanity had become the foundation of a new interstellar communication system. Earth's unique approach to quantum entanglement had proven valuable even to the technologically superior Concord species. As the meeting began, Susan took her seat at the table. She still found it surreal, sitting as an equal with beings from distant stars discussing trade routes, cultural exchanges, and scientific cooperation. A year ago, she had been preparing Earth for a hopeless last stand against an overwhelming alien force. Now she was helping integrate humanity into a galactic community that spanned thousands of light years. After the meeting concluded, Susan returned to the viewport. A Guardian ship was departing, its impossible geometry seeming to fold in on itself before it disappeared into faster-than-light travel. Alan joined her again, bringing 2 cups of coffee. Thinking about how far we've come? Actually, I was thinking about our message, Susan replied, accepting the coffee. Of all the things we could have sent, threats, pleas, technological specifications, we chose to show them who we are. Our creativity, our compassion, our cooperation. And that made all the difference, Alan agreed. They watched as Earth completed another rotation below them. Sunlight crept across North America as night fell over Asia. Billions of people going about their lives, most still unaware of how close they had come to extinction, or how a single message had altered their world's destiny. Zeltorin told me something interesting yesterday, Susan said. In their 100,000 years of maintaining the Concord, they've learned that technological advancement alone doesn't qualify a species for membership. What does? Alan asked. The development of compassion alongside capability, Susan quoted. They said Earth's message demonstrated both, and arrived at precisely the moment when the galaxy needed a fresh perspective. Alan smiled. So our timing was perfect. Or incredibly lucky, Susan added. They stood in comfortable silence, watching their small blue planet against the vast backdrop of stars, stars that were no longer just distant lights, but homes to civilizations that humanity was now beginning to know. The Vrexians had chosen Earth as their next target, never expecting it would lead to their own transformation. The Guardians had maintained their distance, never expecting humans to reach them through quantum technology, and humanity had sent a message into the void, never expecting it would alter everything. As Guardian Ambassador Zell Torin liked to say, in the grand pattern of cosmic events, sometimes the smallest threads create the most significant changes.